After the Masquerade, the masks come off, using the Unmasking Diary to explore the everyday process of neurodivergent autistic unmasking. Author Natasha Stavros, PhD, speaks with licensed marriage and family therapist Sarah Liebman, diagnosed ADHD with special interest all things neurodiverse. Join us in this episode of Following the Threads as we explore social, psychological, and spiritual frameworks that empower resilience through change. As a reminder, this podcast is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute counseling, psychotherapy, or mental health services. Listening to this podcast or communicating with the host and guests does not form a therapist-client relationship. The information here is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your own mental health professional with any questions you may have regarding a mental health condition. Welcome to Following the Threads. I'm Natasha Stavros.
And I'm Sarah Liebman.
Today's episode is the second in our disclosure series, focused on disclosing to friends. Honestly, I've had the full spectrum of reactions when disclosing both my diagnosis and current disability to friends. I've experienced denial, rejection, apathy, discomfort, fear, and also support. Sometimes appropriate, and sometimes well-intentioned, but completely missing the mark. The point is, you will eventually have to disclose to anyone who knows you more than in passing, because it's really a part of who you are. And so what you need to do is learn how much to tell, when, and to whom. So masking is an important part of survival, and in some ways, it will continue to be. Not everyone will get it, and for those people, I say good riddance. But getting to that point is eye-opening. And so today, we want to talk about that process, talking about your diagnosis and what it means for you with your friends. Unlike last week's episode about disclosing in romantic relationships, which had clear phases, friendships are much more vast with many more people. And often, and don't follow a linear progression. And so the complexity comes from having many different friends with different dynamics and different contexts for disclosure. So for today, let's start off talking about, disclosing your diagnosis and disability. You kind of disclose both of them simultaneously.
Yeah.
They're kind of one and the same. And sometimes even very well-intentioned friends can minimize you. Oh, you're not that bad.
Yeah. But you've always said, I did it recently in the car, right? Like kind of unintentionally saying like, well, I'm not worried about this about you. And you were like, well, wait a minute, that's my whole life story. And I was like, right, I retract that, right?
Yes. Yeah. It comes up a lot because people will just kind of see you as, because I am twice exceptional, I'm seen as a highly functional, very capable person. And my whole life, I haven't seen myself as that. I've always been like, oh, you're giving me acknowledgement for doing that. But like, I am completely failing socially. So like, wouldn't it be nice if you could give me some grace here in my process of learning that? But for some reason, the expectation is that because I'm functioning, with schedules, for example, and getting certain jobs, high-paying jobs, high-capacity jobs, I am expected to have the exact same level of social capacity.
Right. And that's like where, when you say with schedules, like the outcome is assumed to mean something that doesn't even mean, because you've been saying like, oh, I see why I schedule everything so tightly, because that's how I manage my working memory deficits, right? So even your things that people have put in the exceptional category, you're like, yeah, but I see the twice exceptional part of it right below the surface, right? And, there's such a bias in the world, and definitely in, the psychology world of like, how many kids have been referred for like, an IEP or 504, and they're like, oh, well, he's doing fine in school. But, it's like, well, yeah, but he's spending most of his time in the nurse's office, or he's going to the bathroom for an hour and a half a day, right? Like, it's like, if you're not dead yet, then you must be fine, right? Like that tends to be the finish line.
And that's not a very helpful response when you're going through it and you're trying to process it for yourself. And so coming back to a theme that we had in the first season, which is this idea of self-study.
Yeah.
And so sort of before you disclose your diagnosis and your disability, there's an element of self-study that you should do. And I am not saying this in a glass house, like full disclosure.
You're saying this after you did it sort of just like off the cuff.
Yeah, I got my diagnosis and I just blasted everyone who had known me on some level. Like my diagnosis came back and this is what it was. And I didn't even think about how they would respond to that. It was just like, I felt so relieved and so seen that I kind of just went up on the rooftop and sang it.
Yeah.
Without thinking about who might actually hear it or have opinions about it. And so we had talked about some self-study questions you can ask before this point is this person safe?
Yeah.
And if they are safe, do I have the emotional capacity right now for whatever their reaction may be? So, for example, those well-intended friends, they're safe, right? Like, this is a safe person. That you trust them on some level.
You've maybe had other experiences when you're in the self-study mode of saying like, oh, yeah, I remember when I had to tell them this thing, and that was kind of something nobody ever could really have seen about me. They responded this way. So that's some evidence for this person could be in the take the risk category.
Right. And at that point, though, you kind of have to say, do I actually have the capacity? Because they could respond saying, well, what does that mean? Now teach me about autism spectrum disorder.
Yeah.
And if you're not really at the capacity to explain what that is, then, maybe now's not the right time. Not to say that person's not the right person, but maybe now is not the right time.
And, one thing to remember as an autistic person or an ADHD person is that frequently we use more and more words to try to clear up misunderstandings. And that is often a role we have taken on in order to maintain relationships. And so, this question of like, am I really in the place to just take whatever comes back, well-intentioned, bad-intentioned, idiotic, whatever.
Ignorant.
Exactly. Like, do I actually have to deal with something? Can I not deal with something? Right? Like that's what you've said, like, oh no, I'll just deal with everything until I run myself into the ground.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Which has happened to me. I mean, like I had to muster some adrenaline recently to get a deadline, and once the adrenaline wore out, I basically just laid in a dark room for a day and a half and just could not do anything. So, I think something else we've talked about is that, knowing that your disclosure is going to really start with your most trusted people, the people who are absolutely the most receptive. It may only be one person, but it starts with one. Don't do what I did. Don't go shout it from the rooftop and tell and put it on social media and just tell the whole world what's happening for you. You really need to have that safe space to practice talking about it before you start exposing yourself to the diversity of potential ways that people could talk to you. And I do just want to say that it is really important that you do disclose to at least one person, right? We talked about that in the getting your diagnosis, is that you need to have somebody that once you get your diagnosis, you can actually pick up the phone and call. A recent study.
You don't have to pick up a phone and call. I'm only just stopping because do you want to pick up a phone and call anybody?
No, God, I don't want to be on the phone.
Okay, well, I'm not being that technical, but just to, keep this community large, like there are times when an online community is the safest place, a friend who really loves you, but you don't see them all the time, like those of us who have been through very specific experiences like infertility, where the experience is so specific that when you talk to people who aren't experiencing it, you feel rage and shame. And so sometimes the safest person is not somebody who doesn't have experience too. So that discernment, there's a lot that goes into that. And it's okay to just tell everybody and learn this as you go too. There's no perfect way. But we're trying to give you a little bit of a leg up.
Right. And this is actually backed by the scientific research, which has found that including a friend in any intervention you may take with what you do after getting your diagnosis can really help reduce the negative effect that it takes to make the necessary adjustments that you need. I do want to say that one thing we talked about was in this framework for disclosing to friends, first you do that internal self-study, right? Is this person safe? Do I have the emotional capacity? Are they open and receptive? And then, there's other steps. And we linked this in our conversations before, Sarah. We linked this to sort of the AA disclosure model.
Yeah.
Which is the 12-step program. Now, it's completely different objective. It's definitely an adaptation to that. But in that model, the first step really is establishing support before disclosing widely. Whether that's a therapist, a sponsor equivalent, a peer support group, or an online community.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of hits on your point.
Absolutely. And I think the thing that's really, to link back to where we started in this section, one of the things that the specificity of being in a group that really gets the thing you're exactly talking about, or with friends who really get what you're talking about, is you can sort of understand your own experience. You can start to see it and have, people who are kind of supporting your self-study. And then when you do choose, or not choose, but, just disclose to somebody, you're not left there needing everybody you disclose to really get it and to do it right, because you have a place where you can go. Like, I know many people that I've worked with, I've known who have done, I think it's the 4th step where, you go to make amends. Like, the other person did not ask for you to come and remind them of every bad thing you ever did to them. And you may be really threatening their worldview, which is like, you're just a bad person. The alcoholism is an excuse, right? Like, there's all sorts of responses that the other person is going to have because they're just a different person, right?
And to bring that back to neurodivergence, right? Like, I think for me, what I've heard is like, using autism, your autism diagnosis is an excuse for you to have poor social behaviors.
Yeah.
And that I should somehow tolerate you and your inappropriateness.
Yeah, right.
And so
when you're actually trying to clear up a misunderstanding of yourself.
Exactly, but they don't want that, right? Like, they're like, this is, and so I think one of the things we've talked about is that sort of the next question in that self-study is, before you even talk to the person, what do I hope to accomplish?
Yeah.
Am I doing this to give an amends or amends?
Am I trying to explain my disappearances? Like, and that you may not even if you get a clear objective, you may not get that in that experience.
And so the best people to approach first are the people where you feel like having the conversation will lead to sort of mutual repair.
Yeah.
For both parties get something out of it instead of a one-sided confession.
Yeah. Yeah, because that kind of mirrors what often happens in a relationship where one or both people are neurodivergent, because a lot of times birds of a feather flock together, right? And there can be, like these sort of mutual meltdowns, right? And that is, kind of what you don't want anymore. I don't want mutual meltdowns. I want to melt down as little as possible.
And if I melt down, I want to know that, like, we know what's at the root. We know it's that I'm not a bad person, and like we can find a path to repair.
Yeah, and and I think, in our friendship and just other experiences that I have, it's like coming to the place where you yourself, the neurodivergent person, knows I actually always come from a good place, meaning like I am not inherently evil. Like there are some inherently evil people. I'm not going to say there aren't, but most people who think they're terrible and awful and the worst are not.
Yeah.
And
because they think about it.
Well, right. And building that sense of yourself does come in these relationships, new ones, old ones, online ones, whatever they are, where you like know that that situation is based on me putting myself into a social situation where I would have never had a chance and I just lost it.
And I want to make sure that we have enough time to talk about that. This sounds scary, right? Like you could lose friends, right? Not every relationship needs to be saved.
Yeah.
Some cannot accommodate more of a whole version of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. Research has supported this. You're not alone in this. In the research, there are other people who experience the same thing. And that's to say that, it may be that your friend is not actually able to make the kinds of accommodations that you're asking for. They may not be able, they may not be willing, they may not want to. And it's not because you're a bad person. It's because of what they have to carry for themselves. And that also, the other thing I want to say on this is that the research has also shown that based on the amount of, or the severity and the amount of accommodation that you're going to need, you're going to have a different effect on your friends. So one person may report one thing and another person could report something different because they have different accommodation needs.
Yeah.
One thing you and I have talked about, Sarah, is that, you're going to lose friends, but there is a blessing behind all this. There is a silver lining. And that is learning the difference between transactional versus real relationships.
Yeah, and I just want to add a little sort of ballast to that ship because, when we struggle with social emotional stuff, we may have very sort of a hodgepodge of how do I even know what a friend is? I've called you a friend. I think that's a friend, right? And, and so, a lot of times you don't really see something as a blessing until quite a lot later because it's so painful. All the change is so painful. But I would say the sort of the richness and the depth of the friendships that come after this kind of self-study writ large, not just about the disclosure, really it can be so life-changing in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah. I have definitely felt that. It is really hard to lose friends. For me in particular, I'm always like, socially, everyone's always weird. So I don't really know when something is abnormally weird or toxic weird.
Yeah.
Because it's all weird to me. And so I'm always guessing. And so I've always had a hard time actually discerning true friends. And that is something that I'm learning here is the people who are willing to actually sort of see the whole me and without judgment.
Well, and the mutual versus the transactional, right? And that a lot of times when we are more vulnerable to social exploitation, we can become service providers in our friendships. And I know, and I heard someone interviewed lately who said something that really rang true for me. It's like not seeing my worth and value for so long, especially as a not high performing person in most of my life, I would see the differences I had as like the only things I had to offer. And then I would sort of build relationships on that. And then people would get used to me being kind of their service provider. Right?
That's awful. I'm so sorry.
Well, that's why I became a therapist, because at least you were
getting paid for that.
No, I mean, I'm terrible about getting paid, but at least it was like, we're gonna know that there's a thing we're supposed to be doing here.
Yeah.
I definitely I think I'm a rare therapist, and I've become a better friend since I become a therapist. Therapists have a reputation of being terrible friends, apparently.
Well, I think that's a wrap for us today. So just a quick reminder to subscribe to the podcast to hear next week's episode, the next in our mini-series on disclosure, specifically discussing your diagnosis with your family.
Dun, dun, dun.
Please like, share, or comment. We look forward to getting to know you.
All right. See you next time.
This episode of Following the Threads is inspired by The Unmasking Diary, snippets from the book After the Masquerade, a memoir by Natasha Stavros. The Unmasking Autism Diary, memoir excerpt. I've been having a really hard time. I am just very disabled from existing as I once did. I'm very overwhelmed by absolutely everything. When I flex and try to take on more or return to normal, I crash with exhaustion. This last week, I had to pull myself together to make a deadline. I didn't even work the equivalent of a full-time job, but I worked with intense focus on executive functioning, and it wiped me out. The deadline passed. The work got done. I slept it off. Lived a full day thinking, maybe I'm just faking this whole disability thing. Maybe it's just in my head. I can totally go back to work. Then, the next day, I woke up, walked the dogs, got my daughter to school, drove home, and sat in the car, in the garage, for 45 minutes. I wasn't on my phone. I wasn't listening to music or on a call. I just sat there. My feet were lead weights. Finally, I mustered the energy, pulled myself from the car, walked in the door to the house. All of about 20 strides, collapsed on my bed, laying on my back, staring at the ceiling, with my blackout curtains drawn. My dog lay on my chest. That's when it hit me. I really am disabled. It's not something I'm saying to get a longer vacation. This isn't living. I am not able to live and function right now. To help with my recovery, my therapist gave me the assignment of proactive self-care. Proactive self-care. What does that even mean? We automatically assume that it is taking care of your basic needs, but I think it is so much more than that. Especially if we are talking about being proactive. Sure, I can plan a spa day, but that's not holistic. That's a Band-Aid for a broken system. Beyond the superficial, what does it mean to truly care for something? I think about my 4-year-old daughter and what it means to care for her, and I really, truly believe it is to love her. Sure, it is to support her in meeting her needs, but it is also to accept her for who she is, to create a safe space, and to trust in her inherent goodness. When we place self-care in that context, just brushing your teeth and taking a shower, that's just meeting your needs. That's not necessarily extending acceptance to yourself or creating safety for yourself to just be in the moment as you are. It is not trusting that this is what you need and that it doesn't make you a bad person. It is trusting that you will get back to what you need to do. But for right now, you need to just do this. And just because you're doing this for this moment doesn't mean that you're a lazy person. All that it means is that in this moment, you are doing the best you can. And maybe that capacity isn't the same as it was, or what others expect it to be. It just is. On the backdrop of this, I had to decline a friend of mine's birthday party. I wanted to go. It was a big one, the big 4-0, and they were floating down the river. How fun is that? But when I think about proactive self-care, this does not actually sound fun to me. The 1-hour drive in both directions, for which my husband would have to do, the uncertainty of where we enter and end, the sensory dysregulation from a cold river, in and out of the sun, a water-loving 4-year-old, strangers, alcohol, the list goes on. As proactive self-care, I had to embarrassingly withdraw my RSVP to attend. Both my friend and their partner were concerned. They called to check in with me. It was very sweet. They don't really understand what's going on for me, but they cared and they understood. They accepted me at that moment for what I could give. And that was wonderful. I recently spoke to another friend of mine who has been chronically ill for about 1.5 years now. She told me that getting sick was a blessing in disguise. After disclosing to friends about being on long-term disability and explaining the cause was autistic burnout stemming from recent autism spectrum disorder level 1 diagnosis, I think I know what she means. Disclosing to friends reveals which relationships are of mutual care and which are transactional. This text is a snippet from my next book, After the Masquerade. For early access to the book and other resources, upgrade to a paid subscription via Substack at natashastavros.substack.com. Thanks for joining us today on this episode of Following the Threads. I'm Natasha Stavros, co-host and executive producer, here with Sarah Liebman, co-host, Linda Highfield, director, and Noah Smith, audio engineer and composer.